You love open-world Spider-Man games? You love Shattered Dimensions? How about you play an open-world Spider-Man game that tie into a movie? That is a sequel to the movie. That doesn't care about the sequel to a movie when it was a potential sequel. And it takes its own timeline instead. With the limited street missions that come to an end. Races that have you control the camera instead of controlling the character. A Manhattan that looks barely like anything like Manhattan as you recognize it. Boring, boring, boring whip swinging to control. A sequel to a movie that doesn't use any of this cast or resemble them. A game that doesn't hire the movie cast or use their resemblance, but instead opt to make it a fate cast reunion. Well, you have the Amazing Spider-Man for that. At least it has multiple costumes. Normally, video game stories aren't a high priority to me. I'm not very big into game stories. I'd rather just play the game instead of having cutscenes I'm forced to watch. And especially if it's a movie tie-in game, I don't like to sit through cutscenes very often. And I'm glad at least they are skippable. But for this, I think it's vital to talk about the plot for one simple reason. There's a chaos in the street, there's a chaos filling the city, and it's all Spider-Man's fault. Why? Gwen sneaks him into the Oscorp at night when she's not authorized to enter, so she sneaks in her unrelated, unauthorized boyfriend who he only used to enter because Connors allowed him. For some reason, he had authorization to do that in the movie. I think the movie is good most of the time, but that is a weird plot point. He's told 3 times, at least 3 times, or maybe 2, that cross species coming into contact with another or coming close to another one make them rage, enrages them, and causes chaos. And for some reason decides to sneak Peter in, although he is a cross species.
The solution I'm thinking of is more radical.
Cross-species genetics.
He even tells Connors in the movie, cross-species genetics, when Connors asked. So it was announced in the movie, and Gwen didn't care for safety. It's not just Peter's fault for being cocky and going close to cross-species, it's also Gwen's fault. But it's more Peter's fault. When Scorpion decides to outrage because he's near a cross-species, it was because Peter is near him, near his bed, but he was under anesthetics, and he sensed another cross-species in a place full of cross-species, and they're not enraged by being close to each other. And then this vermin rat person bites Gwen when he's by the window, Peter is by, and this doesn't enrage him. He just bites Gwen in the shoulder and takes her up, instead of trying to attack Peter like every other cross-species filth when feeling insecure by his presence. I don't know what to say, but this plot is stupid, it's ridiculous, everything is Spider-Man's fault. And if you think he's a jerk in the movie, he's worse in this game. Much, much, much worse.
And what exactly are you doing up there?
There you have it, people. Spider-Man beats up the mentally ill.
Also, you have Alistair Smythe, who appears as B.J. Novak in the sequel movie, but he dies here in a post-credit cutscene. He makes all those robots, all those giant massive robots in Oscorp after allowing the cross-species experiments to continue when he announced to Gwen that he ends them because for some reason the head of robotics is now the head of genetics department, but he's allowed to use massive finances, massive resources to make massive robots to destroy these cross-species that were supposed to be destroyed, that were created so soon, so quickly, even under his supervision when he didn't allow it. I don't even know what I'm supposed to think of this plot. Do you know what you're supposed to think of this plot? There's even a recording that states,
"What you spent yesterday roughly equals the gross national product of Belgium."
I don't know how Oscorp afforded this much money, but this happened. And he does it in the main building, in the Oscorp robotics facility, and above that he even made a nanobot serum to destroy the cross-species genetic by killing people. This doesn't make sense, I don't think it should make sense, I don't know what to think of it, I'm just thinking of it, and it's dumb.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Spider-Man, this onus is on you. You were there in the most charitable reading of the situation. You failed to stop the breakout. Worst case, you were responsible for it. You always claimed to be on our side. Well, Webhead, if that's true, you are rapidly running out of chances to prove it.
I need your blood in this syringe, silly.
Visually, this is the best looking Spider-Man game out of them all, from the Activision era Spider-Man games. So you don't have to say, but the PS4 is better. That goes without saying. It has a PS4 game at least has a massive budget, especially compared to this one. To any game from Activision. Activision Studios had to deal with crackers. It might be the best looking visually open world Spider-Man game from Activision eras, like I said, but it still has its flaws. Shared dimensions look better actually. Buildings look too clean, buildings look very white, way too white. There's hardly any resemblance to Manhattan except for Chrysler Building, and I'm not sure if Grand Central Station is there. There's a park that's supposed to resemble Central Park in a certain way, but it has no building and has no distinguishing landmarks in it that resemble Central Park. And there's Times Square. Aside from that, it barely has any resemblance to Manhattan, if any. Character models aren't too bad. They're actually nice looking. Water effect is nice. Water looks nice. Animation is pretty stiff and shoddy at certain points, but it isn't overly bad. It's pretty decent. Frame rate is not bad, not really a problem, but it really doesn't work for 60 frame FPS experience if you're interested in that. Gameplay is the aspect that makes me think this is one of the better Spider-Man games out there. While it has its flaws like outdoor swinging, you keep holding the trigger and Spider-Man leaves the line automatically. It's not fun to keep holding it, to move, to swing, to turn around as you please. He leaves it automatically with a shout of excitement. It's ingratiating, but at least swinging is pretty fast, so it's not entirely boring. But it's still the least enjoyable swinging system in a Spider-Man game. And no, I'm not counting Front or Fall because that doesn't count as a swinging system. That only holds one web line, you use it to swing kick, and that's it. But it also has an indoor swinging system. This one is pretty interesting. It's like the swinging system from the first movie game, where you keep holding the button and Spider-Man quickly switches whip lines. And you hold another trigger to raise Spider-Man and leave it to see him lower, ascend and descend. This is quite an entertaining feature in swinging system. When it comes to wall sticking, there is no stick button. Well, you can say the same about the Insomniac game, but at least when you hold the swinging trigger and while you're by a wall and let it go, he sticks automatically. This game introduced the function of using the swing button to wall run, but it doesn't work that way. Speaking of wall run, this at least has the nice function of allowing Spider-Man to run upwards and downwards. Insomniac game needs to learn from this from the future. Also, wall crawling is smoother and easier to handle. There are no strange restrictions to wall crawling like in the Insomniac game. Another thing the Insomniac should learn from Beenox. At least from Beenox, if not from Treyarch, who did a better job at wall crawling. Beenox did a nice thing of listening to fans and taking their requests to heart, so I respect them for that. The combat system is made to be free flow. It's not as refined as Batman, but it's still fine enough. They used the Lucha Libre system, probably based on Spider-Man falling in a wrestling arena to see a mask that inspired him to use a mask, along with the line, "I know your face," from the first guy he attacked while searching for the guy who killed his uncle. He doesn't fight in the game the same way he does in the movie. In the movie, he's more flexible as a combatant. He's a more flexible fighter. But at least this combat system is fine. It's pretty refined, it's interesting to look at. You can throw objects, you can throw enemies. It's at least pleasant to perform. Simple and not as complex as Arkham, but even with its limitations, it's pretty fun. Boss fights are pretty fun too, when you tackle the giant robots. They are engaging and entertaining, and the rush is exciting. Yes, exciting is the word. But when it comes to cross-species, this is a drawback. And living enemies in general. The combat is fun when you fight a group, but when you fight a boss, you fight single, except for Piranha or whatever this name of this boss is. He brings his troopers, and it's not a pleasant experience. Boss fights, when you fight these bosses, you have a few attacks you can use against them, and they're the least interesting attacks. Whip retreat, dodge are extra features to do, and whip strike. But those things don't add to the experience enough to make it fun. It's still boring boss fights, and you're very grounded, so Scorpion and Rhino fights have some interesting moments, but that's about it.
Through that. Someone's in the big electricity bag.
You gotta see it as it is. It's funny you should say that, because I was looking through some old photos and it looks very, similar.
I'm still strong enough to defeat you.
You think so? Then I'll just have to smack you around until you see the light. Just hold still for a minute. This won't hurt a bit.
There's a nice variety of activities you can engage in when you're not playing story missions. Too bad they come to an end, and it's not like Ultimate Spider-Man where you play and finish the requirements, but can still perform more street missions anyway. No, they come to an unfortunate end. And this cuts down the fun when you replay missions. All you have to do after you end the game 100% is you have the story missions to replay, and in some cases not in the entirety of them. Well, a variety of street missions, at least you have snipers, you can stop snipers, and, stop muggings, and when it ends you have to talk to the people, but at least it's not as ingrating as in Assassin's Creed, the original one, or the Brotherhood, when you have to keep listening to the same thing over and over and over to a level of frustration. And it doesn't start with a cutscene, so this is at least a relief. There are also cars to stop, and when you're done, you have seen the animation inspired by the intro to the 1967 animated series. There are races, but unfortunately, in some of them, when you challenge camera, but unfortunately, when you challenge the camera, you control the camera, not Spider-Man. When you hunt candles, at least, and charges, at least it's you controlling the main character, you controlling the protagonist. Stealth is one of the better aspects in this game, because when you stealth, you sneaky, you can run away and see enemies searching you. So this is more like Spider-Man than an Amazing Spider-Man 2 and the PS4, which is like Assassin's Creed. You have to hide and just wait for enemies to stop searching or stop caring. This one, you see them searching for you and you can hide behind them and attack. So this is something I prefer. I'm not gonna be harsh on Beenox for using the other system, the sequel, because I'm one of the people who requested that thing and they listened. So that's my fault if it's a fault of anyone. But I appreciate Beenox for listening. So thanks, Beenox. There's also the nice feature of taking down two enemies at once when they're close together. I feel bad that this feature is non-existent in other games. This one is fun, and I hope it returns. At least I hope Insomniac implements it in a sequel. There's a nice variety to costumes. I like that they use the Raimi suit, but it's too bad that it's the black suit and not the main suit. I know it's a DLC, but for some reason the DLCs keep making the game freeze for me, so I never used them, whether they're features or the extra costumes, and they barely appear. When I install them, they don't make the game work. The game doesn't work. On consoles, there's the choice to picture symbols to unlock the suits, but since I play it on PC, I don't have this luxury, so I have to unlock them through activities. And for some reason on consoles, it has the inverted Future Foundation suit, but I only unlock the way it actually is. That looks like an anti-Venom, that looks like the villain. If you start a new game plus, well, at least it keeps the suit and the comics you unlock. I like the comics and profiles and character figures. So at least this is one positive thing to say about the New Game Plus feature in this, even though it's not really a New Game Plus. When you start a new game, it's just that you don't have to unlock everything from the scratch. The sequel didn't give that luxury. Maybe because in the sequel you see them in Stan Comic Shop, and in this one you see them through the menu, and the main menu of the extras feature. I think the game had potential to be one of the better Spider-Man games, but it has a few shortcomings, so it's not there. I'll give it...
Give that an 8.6.
No, that's too generous.
B minus.
Yeah, maybe a B minus. Maybe. I guess that's an 8 out of 10. It's a fair score. Given that I care more about the gameplay, I think it's a fair score. I had fun with it. Aside from boring bosses and limit to the street activities, I think it has more pleasant points than the negative.
There you have it, people. Spider-Man beats up the mentally ill.